So, Alex, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you again, Daniel.
Likewise, it's been a real pleasure to connect with you over the last couple of years and to be part of what you've built in Norway, which, as I look through this screen at you, is staring me in the face as a very beautiful location, but also a very inspiring setting at the festival that you host in the hotel that we can see in the background. And the thing that really impresses me about the Norwegian Yoga Festival is that it's not just about physical practices and it's not just about one perspective. And there's lots of different people coming together talking about ideas, but also the participants, often speaking a second or third language, are really interested in engaging in deep inquiry, discussion, debate in really large numbers, more people than I can ever attract to any of my courses here in the UK. So I really want to ask you, how does that happen? How have you been able to build such a community around yoga more broadly rather than just, coming to make shapes?
Well, I think it's kind of part of the thing that, really fascinates us is yoga for life, daily life. How do we understand it? How do we implement it in our life? And what are some of the pitfalls that prevent us from seeing that? And that's kind of always been part of our, you could say agenda, our theme here at Nøsen. And we've been very much interested in trying to bring yoga to the normal kind of, or normal, I would say, unnormal people that go to a normal yoga class. We've been working with inmates from prison. We've been working with drug addicts. Trying to let them to see, will yoga work for them? Then we could say that yoga is actually working. Rather, is yoga working for the modern pop culture of yoga when people are just like fascinated by yoga? It's very hard to get some good solid proof whether yoga is working or not for them and creating a change in their life. Although I would say, yoga helps mostly in all people's life if we're patient enough to inquire into it. But we were very fascinated here at Nøsen trying to bring yoga to the, you could say, people outside of the yoga pop culture, because that was a more kind of, honest impact rather than those who were just fascinated by the modern hype.
And practically speaking, how is that manifesting? You've got there, I think, working for you, a number of people who are part of a broader program that you're running, providing yoga-based rehabilitation, basically. And is that most of the staff at Nøsen, or is it just a proportion?
No, we have some, professional staff that is trained. Well, I have to tell you the whole thing at Nøsen, we had no experience from the restaurant industry, hotel industry, service management industry, but I had experience from yoga and being a yoga teacher for 20 plus years and diving into the kind of Sanskrit and Indian tradition, trying to scratch the surface of yoga and imply that in practical life. Worked well, and we were lucky to attract some people who wanted to come and work here. We have some great professional chefs and a woman who works as a daily manager, and other people who works with cleaning the place and carpenters and things like that. But in the beginning it was very much just like living from hand to mouth and trying to survive, basically, and not go bankrupt. And now we are able to sustain on a daily basis and feel infinitely grateful for that. But in order to give back something to society, we try to always allow former inmates and drug addicts to come and live with us for like anything from 6 months to 3 to 6 months to a couple of years. And for those who really make a change and make a turning point in their life, we employ later. And now we have about 4 people who are employed working here with a background from being in prison over a longer period of time and being a drug addict. And then in addition to that, we always have like 10 people who are struggling in those areas who live here, and we just try to train them, help them, let them take part of the services we do here. And most of the time it works really well, but sometimes it's a bit of friction and it's headaches and it's hard work, but it's become when we have a good harmony among the staff and volunteers here, Nösen is the best place to be. But also we are a little bit, management at risk when we take in somebody, directly out of prison. And some people have some psychological issues that is hard to deal with, and they have a history of, struggles for a long time. And we are not really a professional institution that can really help people with serious, psychological issues. We just try to help them with yoga, creating a good environment, creating an atmosphere of trust and mutual faith in each other. So that's how we run it.
There's a couple of programs that I've heard you refer to and seen people, wearing T-shirts with slogans from. And I wonder, are they actually two manifestations of the same thing? Back in the Ring is the name of one of them, and Gangster Yoga is the other. And they both, have this sort of street fighter dimension to them. And I'm curious whether they are actually distinct programs or they're two ways of talking about this project that you've just been describing.
I mean, we need to distinguish between this, like Nösen Yoga and Mountain Hotel. That's one thing, and that's the kind of business that we run here. And that's a charity organization that I started 12 years ago called Back in the Ring. It was actually called Yoga for Life, but because we did some projects, the Back in the Ring became the famous name. We call it Back in the Ring. And part of that program also, it's gangster yoga for the people in prison. It's, of course, and it's not the bling bling gangster style that we try to glorify gangster in any way. It's the kind of the opposite of, if we just called it that to attract some people in prison. It's very much a program we run trying to make the gangsters, or the people being caught up in a very disruptive, destructive criminal behavior. And that really comes from, lack of understanding. It comes from, deeper issues of traumas and not fitting in with life and being an outsider rather than a contributor to society. And gangster yoga is mostly programs we run in prison. And the Back in the Ring program is programs we run for, you could say, people who have been to drug rehabilitation, or people who have been to rehab and live in a certain town, trying to fill their days with meaning. Back in the Ring today is active in more than 20 towns, so you could say cities around, although our cities is not so big in Norway, Oslo being the biggest with 1 million. But cities around Norway where we have programs, and in some cities we have yoga programs 5 or 8 times a week, where we have, professional yoga teacher or a former drug addict who we train to become a yoga teacher, and that we work with, they implement different aspects of yoga. And then we have various dialogues about, you could say, what we call grundstein. They're cornerstones in life. It has about value. What are our values really, and how do we implement them in our life? So the whole kind of Back in the Ring program is a charity organization where we get a little bit of money now from the Norwegian government and the criminal justice department that help us fund the teacher and kind of running the program within the various cities and the jails, 17 jails in Norway. But the Nurse Yoga and Mountain Hotel is it's a business where we create services for people that come. And it can be, I hold some yoga courses here, but there's a lot of other great teachers that come, you being one of them, and you being the Norwegian Yoga Festival being one of the things we do in order to create a good yoga atmosphere, and simply having normal workshops and teachers come. And also we have family festivals, and we do a lot of various things simply to, first and foremost, to create a good atmosphere and environment, but also things we have to do to make money, to pay the bills and pay the staff and make it go around.
I'm curious about your own background that led you towards the kind of work you were just describing. I know that you were at one time a boxer, and you've described in various storytelling moments some of your own experiences with being a bit wayward as a younger man. Wonder if you could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was young and restless, and I never, grew up without the father, and being alone with a young mother who was an artist. It was hard for her, and I had a twin brother, and we were both reckless and crazy. And it's a long story, but later, an adoptive father and dysfunctional family, and some sad things. And I was an angry young man, with a lot of unresolved issues and lack of trust and lack of solid foundation in myself. So like naturally I fell into a lot of drugs and crime from the age of 16. But then I was very lucky to have a very good boxing coach that saw me, and he kind of put some hard demands on me. He said, either you continue that nonsense you're doing and go to prison or end up like a drug addict, or you get yourself together. You come here and you train boxing with me every day. And that kind of work, that discipline, and that kind of, you could say, it saved me from the streets. And some of my friends from that time, they're dead of drug overdoses, so they went to long prison sentences, unfortunately. One guy I ended up meeting in prison, I don't know if you remember him, Albin, who a black guy, and he's now a yoga teacher who runs his own yoga studio and all of that. So that is a nice, the whole program at Back in the Ring started that I wanted to give something back to society, because I was lost and reckless from the time I was 16 to 18. And then later I moved from Oslo to Sweden, starting, pursuing a career as a ballet dancer. Not belly, but ballet.
How do you balance those two things? Going from being a street thug turned boxer, a very successful boxer.
I was a break dancer in my youth, and also a Norwegian champion there in 1984. So. And then I had a friend who was a jazz dancer, so he kind of brought me along for the jazz class, and I was the worst guy in the class. But it wasn't that many male people dancing at that time, so you could say I was lucky. And I got accepted at the Ballet Academy in Sweden, and I studied there for the first year. I did boxing at the same time, and I became Norwegian champion that year. But then I also had a son, and then I thought, okay, now I have to take my studies more serious, and I took a break from boxing, and I was very glad and happy that I never went back, because there's a life after boxing also, particularly when you do it on an international level. It's hard, and the impact, it caused certain damages and sores and scar to the body, brain, mentality, and it's not worth it long run, So luckily I got away from it pretty unharmed and unscarred. But
and then you found yoga.
Yeah, then I found in the mid-20s in Sweden, I had just accidentally joined a yoga class, and I remember lying there in Shavasana afterwards and just feeling wow, this I've been longing for, and this it was something I was missing in my life. And you can say maybe it was the peace of mind, maybe it was that holistic experience of the body mind connection. I don't know, but ever since that, I kind of made yoga, an important part of my life, and I pursued the practice pretty much 4, 5, 6 times a week.
And yeah, as seems to be your nature, went pretty far pretty quickly. And before long, you're in India, and not just studying physical yoga practice, but really trying to immerse yourself in mastery of Indian wisdom, studying Sanskrit and all manner of philosophy. Where did
Well,
that drive come from?
I don't know if it was mastery. It was more like an inquiry and a hidden interest to do something with my brain and focus all because I had so much energy and probably all ADHD and all the letters you
Right.
could have at that time. But
Mm,
I had I just had a longing to learn, and I was also fortunate. I came to London in '96, actually supposed to pursue a further career in theater and dance, but I was so absorbed in the whole kind of yoga scene who was starting there back in London in '96. And before I know it, I was working at Crete for first at Ibiza for Godfrey Devereux, like a self-proclaimed tantric mystic, and then later for Derek Ireland in Crete for
two
4 months.
very strong characters,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm really grateful for the time I spent with those two guys, because that
Yeah.
also shaped me. And then I came back to London, and that's when I started SOAS.
Ah, okay. So you went to study initially without having been to India, but you decided you wanted to focus on Indian traditions because
Yeah,
of your yoga
because of
experience.
the yoga, and I had an interest to kind of study Indian and Eastern philosophy.
Mhm.
And then there was a program I spoke to, one of the advisors at SOAS, and they actually were, and I was very, very fortunate because I was like missing, I didn't have a proper A level degree due to being wild and reckless in my youth, but
Mm.
I got a good degrees up till I was about 16. So they admitted me at SOAS on a, you could say, diploma course under the pretense that I had to get good degrees in all my 4 courses in order to pass to the next level. And then since I did that, I got accepted into the BA program the following year. And then later I did a master program in Indian philosophy and Sanskrit.
So you'd already got some, proficiency in Sanskrit before you show up in Mysore and start trying to learn, or
Yeah,
had
yeah,
you
yeah. No,
already?
I had a
Yeah,
first degree with Renata. Yeah, later with Renata Sementima, and then
yeah.
who was married to Paul Time, and then we had another woman in the first course. So I had a basic, the first year at SOAS was, of course, hard, going through the Sanskrit with missing a lot of the, formal qualifications. So I really struggled that for first year to, get a good grasp of it. But then later, when I went to India in 1998, I was very fortunate to meet some great teachers at the Sanskrit College in Mysore and other people working at the Oriental Research Library who became my teachers and guided me, like H.V. Nagaraj Rao, M.A. Alvar, Gangadhara Bhatt, and other people. So I would feel infinitely grateful for that. And then, of course, I met with Pattabhi Joyce and studying with him and trying to impress myself on him. And, that was a whole very interesting experience.
How long did you study with him for?
Well, I studied, first of all, when I studied with Pattabhi Joyce, I also told him that I was a student of Shankaranarayana Joyce, which
Mm.
was an enemy to him at the time. And because they had some unresolved issues way back. So he was just like, okay, you come back later. He didn't want me as his student. But I kept persisting, coming back every month, asking to be accepted as his student. And finally, the 4th month, he let me come. And a lot of that it was, I think, grateful to Sharat, actually, who saw my sincerity and interest. So he said, okay, let him come, and then I was basically a student of Pattabhi Jois from 98 until he died in 2009. Yeah, every year. And I spent years, and basically from during that period of time from 2008 to 2019, I spent, from 1998 to 2000, I lived in Mysore almost continuously. And then later I was there for 3 to 6 months almost every year. So I got a lot of experience of, you could say, pushing myself through the series, making hoops with the practice, then also seeing the way Pattabhi Jois worked, and talking to him, getting to know him, seeing him, as a human being rather than just this Guruji. Now that was infinitely grateful for that time.
I remember seeing, in fact, the first time I saw your face was in this film, Breath of the Gods, where you're there kind of helping the director find his way around the traditions that come from Krishnamacharya. And there's Pattabhi Jois, and you're sort of sitting there helping to interpret and get a bit of yoga instruction across, but also there's a kind of worlds collide thing happening as this earnest German film director trying to research things, and Pattabhi Jois sort of sitting back, very relaxed. And then there's this one scene where he go and he has this sort of reintroduction to some of his old friends, and he's wearing all this gold and it just sort of I guess it was easy.
And rings.
Exactly. No, and all these stories about, the first question you get asked when you turn up wanting to study is, have you got money? He was a worldly guy, it seems. And I wonder, was it his students who put him on that pedestal, gave him this name Guruji, or was that something he was quite keen to see them develop?
No, I definitely don't think Pattabhi Jois ever wanted to be Guruji or like put on a pedestal, because I remember once in England in 2000, where I had a good friend that I brought from the Sanskrit college. If it was 2001 maybe, where Pattabhi Jois came with the family and they were teaching and things like that. And then he said to my friend Vinayaka Bhatt in Canada, he said, like, look at this craziness. I said, I never asked for this. I never dreamt of this, but that's just the effect of yoga. I just try to serve yoga and look up where I have become, was kind of what he said. And I remember Vinayaka Bhatt afterwards said, wow, that was a very humble way of saying. He didn't go looking for fame and name like, unfortunately, a lot of modern yoga teachers do these days. And it comes with a lot of problem. Remember Pattabhi Jois, he taught for 37 years at the Sanskrit college, just being a basic gym instructor. He was being basically the physical teacher for the Sanskrit students, and having the lowest salary pay. And then later he worked for the Ayurveda college. Then later he started teaching out of his own house in Lakshmipuram in the early 70s, and kind of the rest is history. But I never get the impression that Pattabhi Jois wanted to play a guru, because he was very, in some of the questions he was asked, and in some of the conferences that he would participate in, he never tried to put himself up like a guru. He was just like this grandfather sitting there trying to give advice on his personal views on yoga. When that being said, like when you create too much loka sangraha, too much attachment to the world with money, world fame, it comes with a whole lot of problem. And I don't think he was really prepared for that. And I also think that the guy grew up poor, and when you suddenly get a taste for money, it's like they interview the first people come, you spend your time counting the money. That's like something you enjoy, maybe. I think I don't agree with that, and I think it's sad that so much time went into counting the money. Luckily, some Western student gave him a counting machine after some time. So
speed the process
but
up.
in the olden days, he used to sit and count every rupee note. So if you had like a 15-10 minute meeting of it, almost half of it went to counting the money when you had 100 rupee notes and trying to pay. But all in all, I feel infinitely grateful to Pattabhi Jois, and I feel the time I spent with him was very instrumental in shaping my understanding of yoga on a practical way, how we deal with it on a daily basis. And what Pattabhi Jois reflected to me was that he was just a simple man, having had the privilege of studying yoga, and the yoga was the most valuable thing he had, he felt. And it has shaped and blessed his life in far infinite way he could possibly dream of. And
of course, go ahead.
I remember
Sorry.
talking to him also, asking him a question on that. I asked him, Guruji, and I called him Guruji just out of respect. And because in India, it's like you call somebody who's your teacher, you call them Guruji. That's the normal thing. In the Western world, we make a big thing about, oh, Guruji, are you surrendering to him, making him your spiritual teacher or whatever? It's not like that. It's just a practical kind of guy giving you advice, teaching.
You could call your guitar teacher the same, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, Guruji. So I remember asking him a question, what have you contributed to the world of yoga? And he said, nothing. I've not contributed anything. The world is much greater than me and you. Yoga is, he said. If you really look into the teaching of Patanjali, it's like, in Bhagavad Gita, yoga is, and it's the kind of, you could say, science, knowledge, understanding of how our body, mind, organism works. And it's not so much about I, me, and myself, how I can really contribute and have some extraordinary opinions about yoga. It's rather about trying to understand yoga the best way we can and facilitating that in the best way we can. And I felt Pattabhi Jois, despite his flaws and fancies and being a very simple man, he contributed to what he understood in a very beautiful way, making dynamic, you could say, modern postural yoga accessible to the Western world in a beautiful way by teaching a lot of Western students a valuable practice that later, changed the world of understanding physical yoga in the West.
Thank you. Yeah. And I feel, we can't really talk about flaws without acknowledging what's come to light in recent years and how that's affected his reputation. And given that you were there a long time, I just wonder what you saw of the ways in which he interacted with female students.
I mean, first and foremost, I've seen some of the pictures circulating on the internet, and it's like graphic and terrible when you have your hand up a woman's crutch. It's unacceptable in all ways, and it kind of totally destroys somebody's reputation. But that being said, just to make clear, that kind of behavior is wrong in every aspect, in every way. It should have not been done, and it's critique worthy. It's just not right. But that being said, also knowing Pattabhi Jois, I know I never saw an insult or he doing this to anyone. To me, it's like I heard rumors and how he's giving people the Mula Bandha adjustments. Everybody just used to laugh it off because I guess they didn't take it serious enough. It's disgraceful and wrong in all ways, but somehow it was just laughed off by the students and the community in Mysore. I never saw it. I never saw he did it to anybody. And I think also people didn't take it that seriously. And now in recent years, some people have come forward and say they have felt infinitely uncomfortable and some borders have transgressed. And to that, we can just say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. But from the way I knew Pattabhi Jois, I know he liked to trick people, push people's buttons, and he liked to just like put things out in the open and not to have any kind of shame. And so instead of like, and when you're in a room, when you're like 80 years old and when you're room with people in skimpy yoga clothes, instead of he was maybe in a wrong way saying he was making fun of these things. But despite of that, it never justifies putting your hand up a woman's crotch. That's wrong. And I feel embarrassed to hear about it, to know about it, and know that I was part of it and nobody addressed it beforehand. But somehow we just like ignored it and didn't take it seriously. But I've seen some pictures like from the Puck building in 2000 or 2002 where this happened, and that nobody came forth and addressed this forth is critique worthy of the Ashtanga yoga community. And for that, I can just say, I'm sorry.
No, thank you for addressing that. I suppose I raised it because, the big question really is, how far does yoga work to correct our tendencies towards misbehavior, and how much are we stuck with being flawed human beings, just trying to keep a handle on it?
Yeah, and I think if anything, Pattabhi Jois proved and showed me that, he's a normal guy struggling with his confusion and delusion like the rest of us. But he also has a skill of, knowing a tradition, transferring a tradition that is rich and deep. But it doesn't take away the responsibility of who we are as human beings. And if anything, he showed me that, yes, to me, he was a great teacher. To me, he really, challenged me in certain ways that I had to look at my own stuff. And when I eventually did, he was ready to teach me. Before all that, he was just kind of ignoring me. But he showed me also that, we are imperfect as human beings, and we all have our stuff. And that's the thing we need to look at before we can know yoga better. And yoga can enrich our life in numerous ways. Why Pattabhi Jois did what he did, touching some women and stuff, I don't know. I just know that I hope it showed a very, very strong, gave a very, very strong signal to other yoga teachers to come that never, ever do something like that. Also the role of a yoga teacher-student relationship is a very delicate relationship, and that needs to be treated with the utmost respect and care. Because yes, as students, we are more fragile, gullible, and susceptible to just kind of believing whatever.
The teacher knows best, and I do what they tell me.
So from that point, I'm embarrassed that it happened. It's so wrong of Pattabhi Jois to do it, but it doesn't take away the fact that to me, he was actually a great yoga teacher, and I'm infinitely grateful for what he gave me.
I think it's important to acknowledge that those two things can coexist, because that's how we are as people. We do
Yeah.
some things that we can be very proud of, and we do things that we are ashamed of. And somehow we have to continue being functional humans rather than destroyed by the shame and guilt and despair over our misbehavior. Otherwise, there would be no prospect for something like Back in the Ring, the possibility of redemption through a commitment to changing course and anchoring oneself in new values. And I wonder, which are the most important values? You mentioned that word earlier when talking about these guys. Which really are the guiding principles of this philosophy?
Well, I think for anybody in life, I mean, I also have the fortunate to be a father again at the age of 54. I have a son who is 4 years old. So I get to see all this stuff again that, as children, we struggle with. And for children, for all humans in general, the most important thing, the most enriching thing we can give each other, I think, is trust, that you feel safe and that you feel secure, and that is the kind of basic need we all have. And for drug addicts and people who've been to prison, another very important thing is honesty. Before you develop honesty, and it's yamas and niyamas basically, which it's also built upon. But the main values that we teach is, first and foremost, it's honesty, and then it's like faith and humility. That is the kind of first three principle we work with in order to get a deeper, more honest understanding of who we are here and now. And then we try to implement that with some discipline and change. And then we focus a lot on patience, discipline, and stability. How do we develop those qualities within this? And then, of course, yoga practice, commitment, sincerity, endurance is a part of the teachings that we do. And the next phase is very much about how do we function in a group with other people in the community. And then we focus a lot of basically how do we relate to our community? How do we build trust? Are we genuine contributors to our community? How do we develop greater empathy for people who are struggling and see our own struggle? And how do we develop aspects of devotion to persevere with things and to find love to life and to the things we do? And the last phase is very much about finding focus, like dharana. Ekabantas dharana, as Patanjali says.
Keep the mind in one place.
Yeah, over a longer period of time and not allowing it to kind of wobble and fluctuate. And when we succeed with that, we believe that a greater sense of wisdom arises within us, because then a greater understanding of yoga also arises when we learn to peel away all the destructive, disruptive tendencies within us, all the kleshas, etc. And then eventually what remains is love, because we all, love. We have crazy, wrong ideas about it, but it's a trivial world, but we all search for love and greater meaning and higher purpose in life. Then our life feel more fulfilled, and to find love in the things that you do, to find real love in relationship with others rather than just trivial, fanciful needs and desires. That's not love. But a deeper sense of love, when you commit and you make sacrifices, and when you learn to prioritize what is important above what is not so important, then we can learn to come to terms with the things that really matters, and get touched by the things that really matters. And then I believe that what we're left with is love. you learn to appreciate life, other people, and go deeper into the relationship you have in your life. And I believe, there's a lot of workshops you can do on various topics, but some of the best workshop you can do is like being in a family and the relationships and dealing with the stuff that comes up.
Trying to stay anchored, the sort of the Gita idea, keeping your steady wisdom in the midst of all of this chaos. And to get a good grounding is what practice can help with. It's something that can keep us, able to align with those values in some way, at least, while we're being blown off course by everything that's thrown at us. So I appreciate everything you're saying. I think that's really rich. There's one word that struck me right at the beginning, which I'm curious to hear your take on, and it was faith. It's a foundational principle, you're saying. Faith in what?
Well, in order to faith in the Indian tradition is called Shraddha, and Shraddha is kind of giving your total focus, commitment, and dedication to understand what lies there down the road when you go deeply into something. And there's a lot of, unfortunate experience that come when people have blind faith and they just surrender to a higher teacher or a discipline and hoping to see God, whatever. But faith is, to me, a perseverance with thing and a dedication to what you are doing in the small daily things in life. And I believe that it's very hard to get anywhere without faith, because our mind and, like our antarayas that Patanjali speak about, they are so ingrained in us. So there are pros and cons with everything. And we live in a dualistic world where the senses rule. So until we learn to, what the teachings of yoga are really trying to teach us, it's hard to persist on a path of yoga without a certain degree of faith, because faith it gives us the strength. It's like the wind in our sail that sometimes moves us forward. Without faith, we become too critical, and we don't learn to see what lies a little bit further ahead. It doesn't mean that we stop thinking and stop being reasonable and logical and all those things, but there is a certain, I think, element of strength that comes from faith. There's a lot of things we can't understand with our own mind, but we can feel in our heart, and learning to create a balanced state of mind, a more harmonious state of mind. And then certain things can touch you that you can't really learn intellectually. You can experience, the importance of, say, yamas and niyamas. There's nothing to gain from that other than, a personal harmony and a greater state of mind that maybe it's hard to understand logically. But when you feel the importance of why, non-violence, truth, honesty, and, living as ethically and righteously you can, why that gives a strength that comes with many hidden blessings. But the tendency for most people is to just follow I, me, and myself, and follow the fancies that rules us in the mind. And in order to break those underlying tendencies that bring about a lot of confusion when I'm caught up in I, me, and myself, I think you need to have some faith and belief in certain things that you can't see, explain, and touch on a rational level, but you can feel it on a practical level. If you learn to be patient, and if you learn certain discipline, if you learn to have a certain degree of faith, at least to me, it was very helpful. And that's why we try to implement it with the drug addicts, inmates, and then yoga students that come here.
I see what you're saying, and it really does resonate. I think, for me, one way that it makes sense is to think of it as commitment based on trust. So there's a trust in a process that's unfolding, and that can't just be blind faith. It has to be built on something. It has to be built on a feeling. And says, the commentary on the 20th sutra, I think in the first chapter, it sustains us like a loving mother.
Yes, that's what he said. For if you want to go deeply into, when he speaks about, sampragnata samadhi, of trying to understand our mind, somehow it starts with faith. Although he says vitarka, vichara, etc., but we need to have a certain element of faith in order to have trust that this may work. And then we have to see for how many years we have to continue doing it and why are we doing it. But if it makes you more joyful, if it awakens you, if it makes you feel alive and in touch with what the things that really matters, that it's, I believe, faith is a very crucial element to come to understand that.
Heartedly agree. Even if it's as simple as that there is some value to just being rather than striving, then that's already a big guide for us. And
from just practical experiences, with being a father and having a lot of small kids at home, having also two bonus kids, so 11 and 14, and what I see with my own son, 4 years, and there's a lot of drama, and but I have faith in him and also in myself being a father, and I'm trying to guide him step by step. He has his tantrums and he screams and he shouts and the world falls apart certain times. And that's the way it is for kids. And that's their view of the world. And that's the way it is for adults as well, in certain higher degrees when we're, feel exposed to challenging things. But when we learn to, the patience, the faith, the trust that there is a underlying element of beingness with life that we can't understand rationally, that we can feel it when we develop good relationships, when we take time to create a harmonious mind and delve deep into the things we study. If we're doing it out of ambition and trying to prove ourselves, it's all for the wrong reason. But if we can develop that kind of steady, stable state of mind, I think that takes heart. It takes a certain element of faith to pursue that path, because otherwise, we'd be just stuck in our temporarily understanding of seeing things and understanding ourselves.
Expecting all of these little trinkets and pieces of gold to give us all the satisfaction that's right there in the first place.
Why am I not enlightened? Why? What am I doing wrong? Oh my God, I'm a failed yoga teacher, yoga student. And that takes a certain element of faith to, there's a lot of things I don't understand. I am confused and deluded and bewildered, but still there's an element of beingness and centeredness that is there beyond all the noise and confusion. And I just have to try to trace the source of that and fine tune myself with that. And I think that takes faith more than anything.
One last question, since you raised the word. Is there any such thing as enlightenment?
Like David Swenson says, if it is, I'm definitely a big disappointment. But I never, enlightenment, I don't think so. I think it is a clear way of understanding yourself and the way around you. What people have called enlightenment is, of course, modern translation of the concept of samadhi and various technical aspects of the Buddhist and yoga tradition. But I think whatever enlightenment is, it has to do with seeing the world a little clearer, understanding my own way a little clearer. And when that becomes steady and firm and practical within me, then I think we're getting closer to it. But it's definitely not just some utopian state that people get to. I think whatever form of enlightenment there is very practical of inquiring, understanding the world and ourselves on a very solid, practical level.
It's a work in progress, like life.
Yeah. But, there's a lot of, there's, PhD theses and Confucian books and a lot of stuff about enlightenment that bring us, out of ourselves. And I think that, really enlightenment happens from inside of ourselves when we become clear with what is and feel part of life here and now. And whatever enlightenment is, I think it is a direct awakening to what is truly beautiful in life.
Yeah, Alex, that's a lovely place to end it for now. Really grateful to you for taking the time to speak today and for inviting me to Nersen. And I look forward to seeing you there again soon.
Daniel, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, to see you, and I look forward to hanging around with you more at Nersen in the future. Thank you.